I think that, I mean, 3,000 copies to me like sounds crazy. Like 3,000 people have
Mhm.
my book in their bookshelves. Like that's
Yeah.
a lot. Um, but like I was always one to explain stuff to like my friends, my family. But then I was like, why not take the next step and explain it to the whole world?
Hello and welcome to the Seven Research Podcast. Today we have Hamza Alsamraee with us.
Hamza is the author of the book titled Advanced Calculus Explored, for which he was an Amazon best-selling author. He's heavily involved in science communication. He's the admin for various Instagram pages, which have garnered nearly 100,000 followers in total, and is currently interning at Wolfram Research. He actively contributes to Brilliant.org for math and science, and he's also an explainer at the National Space and Air Museum. Hi Hamza, thanks for being here.
Hi, glad to be here.
So let's start off by talking about your connection with science. What is it that really excites you about science?
I think I was always an inquisitive person ever since I was young. I mean, I always ask questions, and I think I ask questions about a lot of things. It just so happens so many of those questions lie in the field of science or so have some science angle to them. So I think in a lot of ways, like I always used to be interested in philosophy and metaphysics and stuff like that. And in a lot of ways, that kind of ties back into physics and science and kind of like the nature of the quantum and stuff like that where I mean, when I was young, I didn't know about that stuff. But then as I grew older and I got to explore more science and more technical fields, I gained an appreciation of how widely applicable science is and mathematics as well. I kind of see them as one of the same thing um, to kind of life in general. They have applications in almost every branch of my life, like from the computer I'm using right now to sociology, political science. And in a lot of ways, I feel like science shapes my life and I'm shaped by science. And that's why I'm so drawn to it. It's because I want to understand my world better.
Right. So, are you even after diving into science, are you still as interested in metaphysics and philosophy and all that stuff?
I think I'm even more interested. I mean, it's fascinating to me how back in the day, like back, let's say 300, 200 years, at least 200 years ago, science wasn't even a word. So scientist wasn't even a proper word until like 1834. I actually wrote a paper on this. So like the split of science and philosophy.
Yeah.
So back then, you wouldn't, for example, call Isaac Newton a scientist or a physicist. You would call him a natural philosopher. And I think back then, we recognized how science is ultimately influenced by philosophy and vice versa. And I think right now we really have that disconnect where, for example, I see it most prominently in quantum theory, where, you have the rise of explanations like Copenhagen interpretation, where it's like, who cares about, the interpretation of what we see? It just matters that it verifies with experiment. And I think that's like a misleaded way to look at science because if I can understand a deeper meaning and a deeper interpretation of a particular theory, of a particular, structure of theories, why not? And I think that by uniting these fields, you'll have like a way more interesting field in the end, natural philosophy, if you want to call it, and just
Yeah.
have like a more interesting dialogue between each field. Because I feel like philosophy is growing very much disconnected. You can't do proper philosophy anymore if you don't know science. And you
Yeah.
can't do proper science anymore if you don't know the philosophy of science. And there's people who are philosophers of science right now. I just feel like they're in their distinct field and scientists who are actually doing the work and doing the theorizing, doing the experiments, they want to stay as far away from that as possible. And it's like a popular sentiment in the scientific community with people like Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson, other people who want to dismiss philosophy as like, that's not, a part of science. That shouldn't ever be a part of physics. But I take the opposite view. And I think that if we do want a proper science, that we have to incorporate philosophy into it.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. And I think Sean Carroll puts it best when he said that this possibly happened when the center of physics shifted from the Europe to America, where they're focusing on the practical stuff. So, like, philosophizing the science was no longer, that didn't have as much practical utility, and they wanted to focus on applying that physics. And I think that's a pretty good argument that he makes as well. But yeah, I do agree. I hope in the future at some point people do try and unite both of those fields again. I think when universities began, there was no course natural science titled natural science. It was all called natural philosophy. So that sort of predates universities predates science itself. So yeah, it makes sense what you're saying.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's really interesting, like how maybe the shift. And I think that definitely, I think that Europe has more of a focus on philosophy, maybe because like most of the philosophy was done in Europe, right? That, Western philosophy that we call, like Eastern philosophy is a whole other thing. And I feel like there's a revival of trying to get Eastern philosophy to science. Like I'm noticing a lot of that. And I feel like a lot of it is, like people try to overblow things, especially with quantum physics, like quantum spirituality and all that stuff. And I don't know how much of that I can buy. But then, it is interesting to see that, like Eastern philosophy started, people are trying to interpret like science through kind of that lens. So that's interesting. I just want to see more, like you said, I think it might be, just America's lack of focus. And I think that's a bigger problem in general. Like, I think I read some statistics somewhere that philosophy departments in the US have decreased significantly over like the last 20, 30 years. And I think, it's a very important skill, not just for science, just in general. Because, okay, maybe not everyone's going to use, like Aristotle's, physics and his philosophy in their daily lives. But what they will use is the ability to find an argument, to deconstruct an argument and to determine whether it's valid or not. Like that's something everyone does. And I think philosophy definitely helps you with that, helps you understand logic better, helps you understand arguments better and the flow of arguments. And if you're good at philosophy, and you can read those heavy texts, you can be good at, basically any field with words. And I think that as much as we're growing technical with kind of our jobs and our education, I think that being good with words is also a good thing because at the end of the day, you're working with people, even though you may be working on computers.
Yeah, you can definitely bring that skill to other facets of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously in the last few minutes that we talked, it seems like you're really interested in multiple fields. So it's more like interdisciplinary is really your approach.
Mm-hmm.
So what field in the future do you want to do you hope to make an impact on? So it's do you have any such field in mind?
I think, honestly, I want to do a lot of things. But then my first thing that I want to make an impact on, and I think that's my biggest passion, is mathematical physics, theoretical physics. So, that's the thing, I want to go to grad school. I want to get my PhD in that field. And I want to work as a researcher, at least until I'm about 30, just researching that field. And something that I found really cool, and I want to look into that more. So first of all, obviously, I want to look into, big theories of the universe, fundamental theories of everything and stuff like, quantum gravity and all that. That fascinates me. And I would love to be a part of, kind of the mission to explore that. But then I also want to explore quantum computing. And hopefully my goal is I want to start somewhere, my 30s. I want to start a quantum computing company. First of all, I want to do my own research about quantum computing, develop a quantum computer that's efficient, and make a startup generating these quantum computers. And eventually, I hope to continue that until I'm I don't know, pretty old, and then maybe I'll go into kind of more public service roles, either politics or something else, where I would really be interested in trying to go into clean energy, more like nuclear energy is what I believe in, and trying to implement nuclear solutions to our energy problems that are efficient, affordable, and also safe. So I'm really trying to invest my talents in a lot of places because I'm interested in a lot of things. And I think that's all that matters in terms of if I'm interested in this thing, I think that I'm going to be, useful in it because I'm interested in it. Stuff that I'm not interested in, for example, I'm mildly interested in poetry. Like I used to have like a poetry notebook. But then it's not the best thing I'm at. So I recognize that. But then stuff like, science and entrepreneurship, I think that I can be a valuable asset to these fields. And I hope I can be.
Right, definitely. It seems like you have quite an ambitious plan, and that's really the natural trajectory that a lot of people do take at some point. Once they have established themselves in a certain field, they do enter public service, and fusion is something that it's still like at the frontier, and every day you read new stuff about the tokamak reactors and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's definitely a happening place to be in. So good luck with your trajectory.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely an ambitious one, and I'll probably change it a million times.
That's
But
oh, you have something in mind and
yeah, I
you're
think it's cool
passionate
to have
about it, so
something in
we're
mind.
good.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. It helps set like I know like the next step, mathematical
Yeah.
physics and researching that. I think that's like 90%. I haven't changed my mind about that for like, I don't know, since I was very little, since I was like 10. I wanted to do that. But then, like the step after that, make my own quantum computing company. That was only like a thing I realized I wanted to do in the last couple of years. So that might change. So, I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, we were. So you're currently involved in various outreach activities. What is it that really inspires you to spend all this time and effort into communicating science?
Honestly, I mean, it started off with kind of realizing how important science communication and people who were doing science communication were to me and developing my interests and my abilities. So once I realized that, like how important people like, Sean Carroll, Brian Greene, even people like Vsauce, Veritasium, Numberphile, all these types of people on kind of my development as when I was younger, and my interests. Once I realized, I'm like, yeah, why can't I, make my own impact? And second of all, it's extremely fun. Like honestly, like designing those posts, interacting with an audience, and just getting to see people like what I do, what I put out in terms of content, and be benefited from it. I'm not like putting out, TikTok dances, where not really a lot of people would be benefiting, and putting out educational content that people would be benefiting from, whether it's like just, because they're curious, because they're the young and they want to know, or they're older, they want to know, or they're students and they want to use it in, school or something in their career. I think that just gives me joy knowing that I'm making an impact. So, and, I feel like social media is, the next big thing. I mean, it's already the big thing, but I think it's only going to be bigger in terms of educational outreach. More and more people are starting to realize like, hey, this is the brand new way to do outreach. And I think that like, and when I started, I mean, Instagram didn't have a lot of math pages. Like, I don't think there were a lot. I mean, the biggest one was probably like a few thousand people. So I was like, why not be the one to change that? Because I knew on YouTube, there was a lot of math pages, probably on Facebook as well. I wasn't on Facebook, but I mean, it's an old platform, so I'm assuming it has math pages. But then on Instagram, there was nothing of that sort. So I was like, I want to be the change I want to see in the world. And I mean, also I was already writing a book, and I was like, hey, this can also help, like, get me a name, advertise my book. And I mean, initially I only thought of, I'll probably get 1,000 followers, and, that's good enough for me. But it blew up, and it became, from a side hustle, just making posts. Now it became like a full-time thing, where I'm making posts, for hours a day, interacting, going on Instagram, and it's really fun, honestly. And I think the community is what makes it fun. At the end, I think that, if you're going to do meaningful outreach, you're going to have to connect with the people that you're doing outreach to, on a more personal level. Like, that's why I answer like dozens of DMs a day, and stuff like that. And I try to be like very personable in my Instagram page. Like, a lot of people, like, they want to hide their face, be anonymous, like not interact. I want to be as open as possible, and I want people to see me not as, some figure up there. I'm just a friend, who likes doing math.
Yeah, and it definitely seems like you've come a pretty long way. You have over 80,000 followers, and I think you also received the Steven Sturgatz Prize, right, for your math page. So yeah, you also have merchandise, by the way. I noticed that.
Yay.
That sounds like really
Yeah, we
I made a new website. Yeah. I mean, it was. I mean, I spent a little. The one that took the most time was the pie design. It was like it was really cool, and I did it on LaTeX. But the other things was just like very basic. I had a lot of demand on it. Like, yeah, make it. Make a merchandise page. Make a merchandise page. So I did it. Um, yeah, I mean, if you guys are watching, go check it out. Look in my bio. So yeah, I'm trying to like expand, and hopefully, I mean, this is like plans for like next year or something. I'm trying to like kind of build, take this community from Instagram and kind of build a community where I can put more features. Like you can't type math, for example, on Instagram. On a website you can though. I can do some integrations. Do LaTeX integration with the website, stuff like that. I want to take that community onto the web and build a website community where people would I wouldn't be the only contributor. People can contribute, and it would just be like this big community of people contributing and solving problems. Putting out wikis, and that's kind of my vision for kind of the next step in terms of outreach. And after that, who knows?
Yeah, we'll look forward to what happens next.
Yeah.
So for our viewers, his page is called Daily Math. So now that we're on the point, maybe we could just talk about how did you get started with this page? So when and how did it start?
It started June 25th, 2019. I remember that day very vividly. And we started off with, it was a problem for my textbook, and I literally just scribbled down the problem and its solution with my very ugly handwriting. And I posted it. And, I got like 10 likes on it. I mean, I was like, pretty decent, pretty decent. And, I started posting a second problem. And then the third day, I was like, okay, I hate like writing this. Can I just type? And I put out a poll like, hey, do you guys want me to like type it out? It was like, oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, it was kind of a close call though. Like 60% of people said they want it like typed, and 40% said they wanted it written. Like, I can only imagine if I went with the written part, like I wouldn't get very far. My handwriting is ugly for one. And I mean, typing just looks more cleaner. LaTeX is like a very beautiful interface. So, I mean, I started, putting out problems daily, and most of them were actually from my textbook. And I did that for, a very like defined reason. I wanted to see like, hey, do people like this stuff, or am I just very nerdy? I mean, apparently people did. And, like I started up posting literally only integrals. And then I expanded to like more problems for my book. And then by, I think like this third month in, I started putting out like more diverse content. I started putting out like algebra problems, geometry problems, and it literally only grew from there. And I try to do like a new thing, like constantly, try to do new things and try to take the page to more exciting directions, so I can like break off plateaus and stuff like that. But then, yeah, I think that I knew, so my philosophy of it, like I always wanted to do like, kind of start out like a social media page about math, science, stuff like that. But then I was always scared, like, hey, like it's not going to be good. My first post is going to be good. Like I already know. And then I'm like, okay, I mean, it's never going to be good. Your first thing is never going to be good in anything. Your first video is going to suck. Your first company is going to suck. Your first blog is going to suck. And that's fine. That's like, and I was like, why not just take the step now so it doesn't suck a year from now? And that's what kind of got me to do it. And also like, I wanted to publish the book like by the end of that year. And I was like, this is the time to start, building your name. Cause I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm just a 17-year-old with a passion for math. I don't really have like any big degrees or big credentials. I'm not a professor at some big university. Like, who's going to buy my book if I don't prove myself out there and I prove myself as a good communicator? So that's what I set out to do. I try to, kind of build a name for myself as someone who can communicate things properly. I was always one to explain stuff to like my friends, my family. But then I was like, why not take the next step and explain it to the whole world?
So if I'm not wrong, you wanted to publish your book before your 16th birthday, right? It finally published on that day?
Before, yeah. So I published it when I was. So I wanted to publish it before my 17th birthday. So when I was
Okay.
16,
Yeah, I got the
I
year wrong.
published it like a day or two, like a couple of days maybe like before my 17th birthday. So I could say I was 16 when I did it.
Uh,
Definitely. So, I mean, since we're talking about how you took your page forward, do you have any tips for someone who wants to do something similar? How exactly can they grow their audience, and how can they deal with any negativity that they face? First of all, did you face any negative feedback, and would you say that it was valid?
I mean, it was like the negative feedback. Like honestly, I didn't face a lot. I mean, I think that comes as a consequence of like it's like an educational page. You can't really hate too much on it. If I was like, doing TikToks or something like that, where I was like dancing or something, like you're gonna have drama. Or if I was like just, focused on drama or something like that, I would get, hate and stuff like that. But like by its nature, it was very non-controversial. Like it's just math and, very, very plain math. So I don't really face a lot. I mean, some people were out there like, yeah, you always have those people that are like you're never going to use this in real life. And I think like one person, like commented, like, I think it was in the second month. And that comment like got popular. So it was like, he commented, this is for people who don't have a job. And I was like, I have 2 jobs right now. What's up? And, like, I think like that, my comment got like hundreds of likes. And then the weirdest thing about it, I mean, he was talking about like a math thing. I think it was something that pertains to his career. Like he was a programmer. So I'm just like, I know you had to take a lot of math classes. And I mean, people were just bashing him in the comments and just like seeing that like the overwhelming majority of people are going to support you. Like that's what took my mind off of it. Like even if there was some hate, I think it was minimal. And even if there is, like, don't focus on it, just take feedback, but don't take hate. And for someone who's starting out, like, without delving too much into the technicalities of like Instagram, the algorithm, like just social media stuff in general, just focus on making good content, honestly. And just like do it. Like, I think that's the biggest thing. Like a lot of people have aspirations to do something like that, in whatever shape, but then they're too, like they were too scared like me. It's like, oh, my first video, my first post is going to be terrible. And that everyone's will be. If you look at like any big creator, that has videos out right now, like their first was terrible, compared to what they have now. And I feel like people should just take that as a positive. Like you have a chance to grow, and just focus on making good content. People like seeing good content. And if you feel good about it, it's probably going to do well. And I feel like measuring your success in terms of how much you feel proud of your work, I think that's a good thing to do.
So just as we talked like a moment before, Instagram was just one of the things that you do. So how did you personally keep up to like manage both sides? I'm assuming like school and then like other activities and then running this page.
Less sleep. But then, I mean, that's the most obvious thing. But then the second thing, I think that like my time at school, I try to, really invest. Like, I'll be honest, like my senior year, like it was packed. It was jam packed. And I think the thing that I learned to do is actually like multitask. And, I would be listening to a lecture, to a class, and I would be typing away on my computer about my book or like something like that. And I think just learning how to multitask like can be really helpful. Besides that, I think the fact that I'm really motivated help. Like if you're not motivated to do something, it probably wouldn't. It's not going to work in the long term. But also discipline. So I recognize that like some days, like I'm gonna be honest, like some days I didn't want to make a post. Some days I didn't want to write my book. Some days I didn't want to go to class. And I think just pushing through it and teaching yourself discipline, that can really help. Because I mean, you need to have a passion. You need to have passion, but it's not going to carry you everywhere. And I think I realized that the hard way. Like, as much as I love math and physics, sometimes you get bored of it and sometimes you don't want to do it, and that's fine. Like, I feel like a lot of people take that as a sign of, their lack of passion. No, it's just a sign you're human and you get bored of certain things sometimes, and that's totally fine. Just know yourself. I think that the most important thing is being in tune with yourself and kind of like how you live. So I know, hey, when I get stressed, this is what I do. Hey, when I get very, bored with something, this is what I do. And I think the more you know your body and how to respond, and the more you master your kind of your body, your mind, everything's going to become simpler to do in life. And, you're going to know how to handle your emotions and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's very very deep, know yourself. But then it's like, I think that the fact that I try to be very in tune with myself, and realize like, hey, this is what I really want to do. I kind of know what I want to do, why I want to do it, kind of my inhibitions and stuff like that. I think that really helps in setting a clear path forward and really focusing in on whatever I'm trying to do.
Right. So looking back, even beyond your Instagram page and just speaking about science communication in general, would you say that you can draw a line in the sand and say, this is where I began, this is where my journey with science communication began? Do you think there was a moment of this sort, or was it gradual?
I think so. Science communication to me, like just communicating science to anyone, like it was very gradual. I think the time that I really was like, hey, I want to grow, I want to grow my science communication efforts out, where kind of like the first week of publishing my book, and just the feedback that I got, that just solidified kind of my goals to be like an educator and a communicator. I was like, I want to do this, in the long term, and I want to keep writing books. I want to keep posting posting content. And that was essentially what kind of cemented it. But from a very young age, I was very interested in communicating stuff. I mean, I was very interested in the subject, but I was also very interested in communicating it to my friends, my family. So, yeah.
So now that we're kind of on the note of science communication in general, you're also an explainer at the National Air and Space Museum. So maybe we could just briefly talk about that. So do you have any childhood memories or maybe experiences before you became an explainer there? And did that affect your decision to become an explainer there?
Yeah. So there's actually basically two campuses, two places of the National Air and Space Museum. There's the one in DC and there's the one in Virginia. So I work in the one in Virginia, and honestly, I haven't been there in my life before I started working there, but I did go to the one in DC like a couple times. And that kind of influenced my decision to try to apply and work there. I mean, honestly, I didn't even know there was one in Virginia, but it's closer to me. So I was like, yeah, let's go. I mean, I loved the stuff that they had there. And when I came to DC, I was just very inspired by the stuff that they had. I was always into physics and stuff like that. And part of that comes with being fascinated with the moon, with space exploration. So that's really what drew me into there. And I wanted to be, working there, explaining, because I was getting people to explain stuff for me. I was like, why can't I, I want to be that person who does the explaining. And, that's what I became. It was a really fun job. Right now we're off because of Corona. Hopefully we come back, soon, in a month or two. But we'll have to see.
Right. So what's your favorite part of doing this?
Honestly, I mean, I think that my favorite part is people's faces when they hear a very unexpected fact. So I run a lot of weird stations. Basically, as planners, we run dynamic activity stations, and one of them is kind of this the demand unit. The actual space suit that people wear, for example, when they're outside the space station, and just telling them how complicated this thing is and how it costs millions of dollars to make, kind of going into the intricacies of it and seeing people's faces, especially young people, children, even people a little bit, younger than me, teenagers. I feel like I've made a genuine impact on how they see science, how they see this whole field, that will inspire them to be, more close to that field. Maybe that won't be astronauts or astronomers or something like that. but maybe they'll be, you know, aerospace engineers or, you know, just engineers in general and stuff like that. I think that the more I can influence people to kind of become closer to what I like, that's a great thing. And kind of inspire them to learn more about what, you know, we're doing in terms of air and space as, you know, as a species, and how we've come so far, but how we have so much more to go. I mean, really only explored, like, as a percentage, if we rounded down, like 0% of the whole universe, even if of the whole Milky Way, you know, like, we have so much more to go. And I think that keeping that in mind will keep people, like, more motivated to do things. And I want to see, like, in my lifetime, you know, I want to see us go to Mars. I want to see us perhaps visit another solar system. And I want to see that in my lifetime. So kind of knowing that, hey, this person might be the next, you know, might be the person who does that. Like, that's very inspiring to me. And it keeps me doing my job at the Air and Space Museum.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think humans haven't even reached a 1 on the Kardashev scale, if I'm right.
Oh, yeah. I watched a video about that yesterday. Kurgzazast, whatever that YouTube channel's name is called. Yeah, I love it. So, yeah, we're basically, like, what, 0.75 right now in terms of, that scale. And I can only imagine, like, you know, people, like, want to see aliens, you know, and they're searching for aliens, you know. We have SETI, you know, we're sending out signals to aliens. Honestly, I'm scared of aliens. I mean, because think about it like this, like, how do we treat an ant? Not very well. So, I mean, to them, they might be so advanced, to aliens, they might be so advanced that we're ants, that our, like, desires and survival is trivial. Like, who cares? It's some humans, right? So, I mean, I'm kind of scared. I mean, they might come here and be like, oh, it's some nice oil, you know, maybe some nice, you know, plant resources over here. And I'll just harvest that, let the humans die, who cares? I'm kind of scared, but it would be cool if I could meet an alien one day. That would be very cool.
Yeah.
So Hamza, we mentioned your book already a couple times throughout this episode. So you started writing your book, Advanced Calculus Explored, when you were 13, 12, around that age?
13, yeah, I think.
So it was also the Amazon bestseller in various categories. So most people of that age focus on reading books. Given that you were so young, what was your motivation for writing one?
Yeah, I think that so it kind of began with, so I tell that story in, like, the beginning, you know, kind of like about the author section of my book. Yeah. So I came to the US around 7th grade, so when I was like 12 or something like that. Maybe 11 actually. Yeah, so I came to the US when I was kind of young, and I went to 7th grade here. So basically I moved school districts kind of midway through 7th year. And I went to a school district that was more advanced than my previous one. They were teaching more advanced stuff. They were kind of ahead. And I mean, it was like, looking back at it, it was very simple. But then back then, you know, as a 7th grader, I didn't know what that stuff meant. You know, it was linear equations, kind of solving them, plotting them. And that just was, like, so mind-boggling to me. Like, I couldn't do it. And I was always the person, like, hey, I was always good at math. And that kind of pissed me off. Like, hey, apparently I'm not so good at math. Because I was kind of stuck in my head, like, in my current school, like, I'm good at math, so I'm going to be good at math everywhere. But then I realized, like, hey, there's so much more exploring to be done. You know, math isn't just, like, multiplying two numbers or doing fractions or something like that. There's so much more, and that's when I kind of started my learning journey. We had this website called iExcel that, you know, we'd have to do, like, 30 minutes a week. That's our homework, 30 minutes a week on. And I was just, like, getting addicted to it. Like, we have lessons, and even though I was in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, that was all open to me. I was like, okay, right. Like, that's amazing, right? So I finished 7th grade, you know, kind of when I first started struggling, you know, my parents tried to help me, and, you know, I got a decent grade on the test. I think I got a B or something on my first test. And I was like, okay, great. But then that means I don't know, like, everything to be known. So, like, let me do more. And till I get to that kind of perfection stage where, you know, like, my philosophy is, and this is something my football coach used to say to me, it was like, you have to chase perfection so you can meet excellence on the way there. Like, yeah, you can't be perfect, but you have to chase it. So on the way there, you know, you'll meet excellence. You'll be excellent. You know, that's why you want to go. So I started doing a lot of, exercises on that website. I started doing a lot of lessons. And by the time, by spring of seventh grade year, I was already onto like calculus, and I was watching my first calculus video. I remember it very vividly, talking about derivatives. And I was just so fascinated. I was like, wow, like that's such a cool concept. Like who came up with that? Newton came up with that. It's just, wow, like that blew my mind. And I started getting really into calculus. And then one day I was just Googling like hard calculus problems, something like that. And I stumbled upon this website called brilliant.org. You guys might know it. A lot of, the viewers right now maybe already be on it. So I stumbled on that website, and it was big back then. It was like a really big community. Now they moved more towards like a subscription-based platform, but back then it was mainly a community. And I joined that community, started posting problems, started looking at solutions, posting solutions, and I really gained like kind of an affection for calculus in general. And once I kind of progressed far enough in calculus, and I started looking into more niche topics in calculus, stuff like advanced, special functions, more advanced limits and integrals, series, stuff of that sort. And I saw how, those things can be applied in my, original passion, which was physics. Physics was kind of like my genesis passion. Like it was from a very young age, I was interested in physics. And for example, seeing it in, kind of quantum physics and cosmology, all these fields, seeing that math in it was really, kind of inspiring me to learn it. But then once I started, kind of wanted to learn it, I found that like most of the resources were very limited. And even Feynman, there was a famous quote, like he had a famous like integration technique that, like he was known for very famously. He used to like be very good at calculating, these types of calculus problems in, his physics research. And he was like, yeah, like I picked it up from a book, and that book was published like 100 years ago. So even for Feynman's time, it was pretty old. So he's like, yeah, I picked it up from a book, and, like I just kind of got a taste for it. And I feel like people should have a more easy way to access it than a 100-year book. And in my kind of, my journey, trying to read books, stuff like that, I didn't really find, a lot of stuff that appealed to me. I mean, either it was very expensive. Like, I was 13 years old by then. So I didn't really have like $50 to spare on an ebook, right? Or maybe $80 to spare on an actual physical book. I didn't have that much money. Thankfully, I did have a library that I had access to, like the university library. And that's where I got most of my books. But like not everyone has the privilege of getting access to that, especially people, more rural areas, in countries other than, America, where you might not have a university right outside of you. We have a lot of universities in the U.S., but for example, in Iraq, where I was born in, there's not really, there's like one big university, in the city, Baghdad University, and it's very prestigious, and maybe like a couple others that are private, and that's it, and it's hard to gain access to a library. So especially one that has those types of books. So I was like, yeah, why not be, the person to write a book like that and make it everything that I want it to be. So accessible, anyone can, buy it, cheap, I'm trying to make my book as cheap as possible compared to like other books, which maybe like twice or three times its price. And, I feel like the third most important part was just how accessible it is in terms of like writing. Like a lot of these books, they're very heavy and they're very hard to digest, and they just kind of throw you away. Like, I started reading them, and it's just so full with jargon and rigor, which is, if you want to go to like, math research and, rigorous math research, like, yeah, that's a great thing. It's teaching you that. But not everyone did. Some people just wanted to gain an appreciation for it. Some people wanted to apply this, and, the application of it isn't nearly as rigorous as, someone from a math background looking at it. And I found that disconnect between kind of the application side of it and the pure side of it, where you either have a book that is very application based, and it literally never presents any of the kind of theory behind the math, or a book that's very, pure based and only presents the theorems and their proofs. So I wanted to find kind of like a happy medium between there. And that's why I started like writing my book. And honestly, it wasn't a solid idea until very late in the writing process, like until my junior year when I was about like 16, something like that, or 15, yeah, 15, 16. And that's when one of my friends was like, saw me working on it. He was like, why not make this into an actual textbook, like a full-fledged textbook? Because back then it was just like a compilation of, solutions, explanations, stuff like that, problems. And it wasn't really a book, you couldn't really call it a book. And I was like, why not, make it a book and then publish it? And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. So I started really working on it that year. And especially over the summer, I kind of grinded it, so even at Wolfram, like summer camps, when, I did a lot of stuff that summer. But then I tried to like be very focused on the book. I was procrastinating a lot, but then eventually I had to drive. And I think like there was a period of time where I would like write, I had to finish it. So I was just like, I'm going to write, 10 pages a day. And I did that for like a couple of weeks, and that was like very insane for me. And obviously like after that was the even more boring process of editing it, looking it over. And honestly, like since this publication, haven't looked at it, because it's just like I looked at it so many times that it becomes like so boring to look at. Edit it so many times, but I'm proud of it. It's just that like you reach a certain point that you're just like, nah, I'm not looking at that thing again.
Right. So how has the publishing process been for you?
Yeah, so since I wanted to make it cheap, right? I couldn't do that with a publisher. Like I was going to get, like a publisher, like there were, professors that were telling, yeah, like this is great. Like why don't you like professionally publish it, like with a publishing house? The only thing is, for example, like let's say you have a book, like that, my book, for example, you want to publish it with an academic publisher like Springer. They're probably charging like $50 for an ebook. And I mean, you're not even getting all of that. Like, you're getting what, like $1 or $2, off that $50, and like 20, 30 is going to the publisher. And I just find that unfair. Not only because I wanted a lot of money, I didn't get a lot of money from this book, but then I just find it unfair how much profit they make off of stuff like that, off of like educating people. And I thought like, hey, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go down that road. I want to make it accessible. So I self-published my book through like the Amazon platform. And I mean, it was, I try to get as much like the real publishing experience as possible. Like I try to get, an editor, I had people give me feedback, like I had a professor give me feedback. I reached out to like professionals in the field, professors, researchers to review the book and stuff like that, So, I mean, at the end, it came out pretty nice as a book. And it also came out with, way cheaper price tag, instead of marking it as a $50 ebook, I have it as a $10 ebook. And, I try like even in, in more, like for example, in India, like in developed like very rich countries, like the US, like the UK, like I charge what, $10, but then in countries like Mexico, for example, I would charge a lower price because I know maybe that $10 price would be too much for someone living in Mexico or living in India or living in Brazil. So I try to be very mindful of that. Even the $10, which might be seen as very cheap here, might not be seen as very cheap in Mexico or India or something like that, or some country like. So I try to even make it more cheap there. So I think in India, the ebook is actually like $6. I don't know how about I think it was like 450 rupees. I'm not sure, but then like I try to make it very accessible worldwide, and Amazon was really great in making that happen. Because they are worldwide and they're only growing. So it's really nice to be able to have that type of solution, to be able to instead of going through a publishing house and having to mark up the price so much, just be able to publish it on your own and set the price that you want.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think there's anything sacrosanct about getting a publisher itself, and it's quite noble that the reason you're doing it is to provide more access to people who may not have access to it. And yeah, it definitely it fits in really well with the whole point of science communication in the first place. So, I mean, how many copies have you sold till now?
I've never said that, but I've sold about 3,000 copies by now.
That's really cool.
Right.
Yeah.
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 So, what has been the most rewarding outcome out of this experience?
I think that, I mean, 3,000 copies to me like sounds crazy. Like 3,000 people have my book in their bookshelves. Like
Yeah.
that's a lot. Um, but you know, like other than that, it's just the ability for me to grow. Because I think that like, you know, I wrote a decent book, but then my second book, I think, you know, really gave me the insight and kind of skill to write, you know, a good and even better second book. And I think, you know, with the second book that I have coming out, you know, next month hopefully, or the month after that, we'll have to see, you know, how the publishing process goes. Like I think that growing as a writer, growing as an educator, as a communicator, that's very rewarding to me. In terms of like, because I mean, to me, it's just kind of like, I think of it as the game of life where you're leveling up, and just the fact that I'm leveling up and not plateauing, that's what keeps me hooked on it. You know, because when I look back at, you know, my math page, when I look back on my posts, you know, I started out from very ugly looking, non-attractive, not very educational posts to right now, I think that are posts that are way better, way more educational. So it's kind of, you know, reflecting on how much I improve. That's what keeps me going. And obviously like the feedback and, you know, kind of thinking about how much, you know, how many people were actually benefited by my work. That's very, you know, that's very rewarding as well.
So I'm just curious, what's the second book about? I had no idea that was coming out. So first off, congrats.
Oh, okay.
So that's new news to me. Okay.
Yeah, so it's about so touching on that philosophy point before. It's about paradoxes, and you know, a lot of it is math, a lot of it is philosophy, a lot of it is history. So it's kind of just looking at, it's called Paradoxes, Guiding Forces in Mathematical Exploration. And it tries to look at, you know, a set of paradoxes in each field. So there's different types. So like I looked at very ancient ones, like Zeno's paradox, you know, back in the ancient Greek times, and very modern paradoxes like, you know, Russell's paradox and stuff like that. And I try to explore how these types of paradoxes influence math and how they can be used in math education to kind of further math and further students' thinking ability. And it's part of a two book series. Like the second one is going to be about scientific paradoxes. So it's going to touch more on, you know, stuff like special relativity, quantum physics, you know, the different paradoxes there. And I think, I mean, they're honestly like the scientific paradoxes one is very exciting to me. Only because there's so many, especially like relativity and quantum physics, that you can get to explore. And, you know, those were the things that I started out being very fascinated by. And obviously, like, one of the reasons that I'm so fascinated by them is because they really embody the intersection of kind of philosophy and math, or philosophy and science. And that's what I really enjoy about them. I mean, I get to do both at the same time. So, yeah.
That sounds quite exciting.
So I think this is the most favorite part of the interview so far for me. So you mentioned in your book that most of your graphics were developed using Mathematica or Wolfram language. And you've actually been quite involved with Wolfram Research over the past year or so. So actually, we attended the summer camp together. That's how we know each other.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite moment or experience from the camp?
Favorite? Oh, okay. There's definitely a defined one. So we were looking at, I think it was like Sylvia Haas. I mean, she works at Wolfram.
She was one of our mentors for the reference.
Yeah. So she was presenting something about, I think like poetry. So poetry in the Wolfram language. And she was trying to like, and we got to develop kind of like a graph thing or something like that, where, you know, a machine learning algorithm at the end, where we would make our own poem or song. And what we did, it was me and my friends, we trained it on, you know, Playboy Carti, like he's a rapper / hip hop artist. And we trained it on his songs. And the final outcome was very, very funny. I mean, it kind of had a melody to it. But then, I mean, it didn't make any sense. At the end of the day, like the grammar was so off. And it just like, it was very funny. And that kind of showed me kind of the capabilities of computation. You can take something, and it was very simple to do. Like we literally just had to import the text, train the machine learning algorithm, and we did that all maybe like 30 minutes. So just the fact that I can do something that cool in such a short period of time, that was like one of my favorite moments at the camp. And besides, obviously like the people there, I really enjoy like being in the company of like so many like smart people and so many talented people, because I mean everyone there, like they had their thing. Like I remember forgot her name, but then she was she looked at like Latin poetry. Some people looked at like the French Fusion. Lainey, yes. Some people looked at books and are they nonfiction or fiction. They try to develop a machine learning algorithm for that. And I feel like just the variety of talents that I found there, like that was extremely exciting, intellectually exciting. And the conversations that I've had with people, especially like, with the students, as well as like, with the people that are running the camp, like Stephen Wolfram, his friends and people like that. I got to like really be immersed in, kind of the research experience. And that was like beautiful to me. Just being really in that, it was a very hard camp to go through. Like we were working like all day and night. But then it was very rewarding because at the end, when you presented your final presentation on your, project, you just felt very good about it. And yeah, I mean the people obviously, and that little machine learning algorithm
that was beautiful. Why do I have vague like memories of that? Did you read it out to the class or something like that? Why does it sound familiar to me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, I think Stephen Wolfram was a big part of the camp. He does interact a lot with the students. So how has that experience been? So how has it been meeting and talking to him? Are there like specific conversations that really stood out to you?
Yeah, with Stephen Wolfram, I think a lot of it was kind of he rebelled basically against the norm. He was always, I feel like, someone who didn't fit a box. And that's what I really liked about Stephen, through getting to, know him at camp and even sometimes after camp. I had a little bit of contact with him after camp. Just the fact that he was so unorthodox in his approach, but still was so successful orthodox way, like his success is very, can be measured in a very orthodox way, but his methods to get there were very unorthodox. When he went to, Caltech to get his PhD at 17, he didn't go to, he dropped out of Oxford, which is something like, on the surface level, like, yeah, you dropped out of Oxford on the first week or something, like that's it's a very bad decision. But then after you hear like, oh, he dropped out so he can go to a PhD program at Caltech next year and work with Richard Feynman, and it was like, your mind is blown.
Yeah.
And then, after that, even when people doubted him, he started his own software company. And, after that, he did new kind of science. And even though there's so much criticism about that, maybe some of it is even substantiated. There's so much criticism. He still like does what he wants, and he's still successful with what he wants. And I feel like that's something that really inspired me. I have, it's not maybe like I have certain people that are, role models in a certain way. For example, like him, I really admire the fact that he's so internally motivated, and he doesn't burn out after all these years. For example, people like Elon Musk, I love his personality. People like Bill Gates, I love kind of their vision. And I feel like by getting these people and realizing that, hey, like they have their weaknesses, they have their strengths too, and just focusing on like, hey, I want to embody that person's, kindness. I want to embody that person's, basically rebellious nature against, societal norms or something like that. I want to embody that person's something. And I feel like that's what shaped a big part of my life, is trying to learn from other people. And I think that's what we do best as humans. That's how, as kids we learn, we try to embody other humans. And I feel like realizing that, hey, like other humans are imperfect just like you, but then you can, get that nice piece out of them that you admire, and incorporate it into your life. And, Stephen Wolfram was a big part of that, process.
Since we just spoke about Stephen Wolfram, I think someone like him really exposes some of the priorities that people have in academia, given that he just started with his Wolfram Physics project, and he's not really taking the conventional route to get it peer reviewed or just publish it in general. I think when people criticize him for how he did it instead of what he did, that does really expose some of the priorities that people have in academia, is that you should stick to the norm. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I'm not saying that I agree with, how he does things. And I feel like a lot of times, like, people take offense, like, especially in the scientific community, for good reason too, because they feel like their work is demeaned. Because, I mean, Stephen Wolfram, in a lot of ways, is much more, has much more influence and can do these types of things. But, for example, like a lone scientist and, like a research university doesn't have the resources to go about and fund his whole physics project. And in a lot of ways, I feel like that fuels the controversy against him, and it basically a lot, like, I was on Reddit, in the physics Reddit subreddit, and it was like when it first came out, and people were talking so much
Yeah.
bad things about him.
Yeah.
It's like,
Mhm.
he's so
Everywhere.
conceited, he's so this, he's so that. And I mean, in a lot of ways, like, I feel like that's the vibe that the project gives off. But then I think that when I met Steven, himself, when I met Steven in person, he was not that type, definitely not. He was like, and the fact that he's so interested in the lives of like young teenagers like ourselves, I feel like says a lot, because I mean, we haven't done that many impressive things, but he's still very interested and he wants to get, involved in, kind of shaping the future of computation. And he knows that starts with, teenagers. And I feel like he was very humble and down to earth guy. I just feel like, his project might send off, a bit, a very off vibe about him that doesn't really convey what he's truly like in person. So definitely that. But then I think that, just the look of it is very unorthodox, and that's what drives the controversy. And that's what makes people dislike Stephen Wolfram, because they see him as, just trying to capitalize off his company and make whatever he wants. And, they feel like he has too much power in that regard. But I mean, at the same time, I really admire the fact that despite that controversy and despite, like the fact that a lot of people dislike, what he's doing, he keeps on and he kind of says like, hey, I know this is the orthodox, but I'm going to do it my own way. And I think that's like it's a very cool thing. I think that, just being able to stand your ground and do what you want and what you believe, I think that that's a really cool thing that I want to embody, in my life always, just be able to, I mean, I think he takes feedback to a certain extent, and I want to take feedback, but at the same time, he's very like strong-willed, and that's why I really admire the fact that, he doesn't basically he doesn't let the hate, the criticism get to him and let him stop what he's doing.
Yeah. I think he himself is like a test of one's open-mindedness, and that's definitely something to be aware about. So similar to his vision, like what we just spoke about, his vision of the company itself is, and Wolfram Alpha and all Wolfram language and everything, that most of the stuff that he's working on is to try and focus, come back to the whole goal of developing an artificial general intelligence, right? So as someone who's more like really involved with Wolfram, how do you think Wolfram language or Mathematica fits into this goal? I mean, just in general, like, what do you think is really cool about Mathematica?
I mean, I think that, it distinguishes it. Like, it was different from the languages that I had before, like Java, Python, because, it's functional. And I think that, like, it's not the only functional programming language out there, but I think that that's, a big part of kind of why I like it. I feel like my brain works better in, as, in kind of functional programming languages. But besides that, I think that basically just Wolfram has, a very, like, it's been around here for over 30 years. And I feel like the user interface, and kind of like the ease of the built-in functions I feel like that really takes it to the next level, and it allows very complex things to be accessible to people generally. And that's what I really like about it. In terms of its goal in kind of like artificial intelligence and that sort of thing, I think that it really it the Wolfram there's Wolfram Alpha, and I think that that's growing by the day. Like I just saw it was integrated with Excel, and that's something that was really cool. Kind of like looking at that and integrating Wolfram Alpha, I feel like with a lot of our stuff like Siri, other things, in our day-to-day lives, I feel like that would make that dream of general artificial intelligence much more closer to reality. Because in a lot of ways, Wolfram Alpha has a lot of capabilities. I think that incorporating those capabilities with some more NLP, natural language processing abilities, like of a program like Siri. Maybe have it, be like, have some components taken from Google and stuff like that. I feel like combining those technologies with the Wolfram Alpha can make for a really powerful, general artificial intelligence that we can incorporate someday, hopefully, into something like a very smart robot. And I feel like to a certain extent, that's kind of scary to me. Something can be very smart. But I feel like it's exciting to see what comes ahead. And I feel like Wolfram makes computation more accessible. It lets, because a lot of times, like, I'm gonna be honest, like building a machine learning algorithm from scratch, and for example, like Python, is much more intimidating than building machine learning algorithm with like the Wolfram language, because they just make it very much easier.
Yeah.
So I think that by letting it be more accessible, I think people are going to be more bound to develop things. And also they already have the infrastructure at Wolfram Alpha to incorporate into some new technologies that can make for a really powerful kind of artificial intelligence that we would always want in society. Okay.
Yeah. So as a community and content intern, what exactly do you handle for Wolfram Research?
Yeah, so I'm mainly working on one project, and I'm developing an MOOC, or massive open online course, on data analysis on coronavirus data. So I'm using the Wolfram language and trying to visualize and analyze the pandemic through a lot of various data sets that are available at the Wolfram Data Repository. So everything from epidemic data to genetic data to patient medical data and stuff like that. I'm trying to use the Wolfram language to interpret it, to analyze it, to visualize it. And I'm trying to turn that into a video course, which will hopefully be up on Wolfram U in a month.
Right. Good luck with that. And for anyone interested, we're going to link his project for the Wolfram Summer Camp in the description in X-ray diffraction, so you can check that out. So thank you, Hamza, for joining us today, and thanks to our audience for tuning in. We hope to see you in our future episodes.